Welcome to another episode of FoundHer Rising, the podcast for women founders in wellness coaching and consulting who are ready to build businesses that create freedom, impact, and income. I'm your host, Christine Huckala, business coach, former psychotherapist, and mentor to women scaling service-based businesses. Today, I'm joined by Melissa Manning, founder and clinical director of M&M Counseling. She leads a trauma-informed counseling practice specializing in trauma, narcissistic abuse recovery, and workplace mental health. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. We were just talking about how you live in St. Catharines, and I'm originally from Ontario. So even though we haven't met, I already feel a sense of familiarity, and I'm so excited to hear, about your journey. Yeah. You've had a very long and rich clinical career. I'd love for you to start off just by saying a little bit about your background and what led you to build M&M Counseling.
Yeah, I graduated with my undergrad in 2002. Oh my God, it's been a long time.
Yeah. I think that's the year I graduated with my undergrad too.
It's been a long time. So it's a rich and diverse history, actually, just like you say, because it's graduated in 2002 with my undergrad. In 2004, I moved to the States and started working in an outdoor therapeutic boarding school in Alabama. Very interesting.
Wow.
Literally running through the fields if someone was trying to run away. Lots of interesting stuff. Within 6 months, I was promoted to the counselor supervisor. So It was just a natural fit for me. I really enjoyed it. And then started working on my master's in the States because I knew being a therapist was one thing that I wanted to do, building it from there. And then I moved to Florida and was there for 4 years and working in the capacity of a unit director. So in a prison for adolescents, sexual offenders, actually, and managing all the staff. So managing the supervisors and the floor staff while doing my master's. And then,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, while doing my master's and also being pregnant the last year, which was very interesting. Interesting mix of all of that.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And then switching to being a therapist. So the strength that I bring is really like the strong leadership and operational side combined with the therapy clinical side, right?
What a great combination.
Yeah. And then moving back to Canada for personal reasons and also financial, with Canada is a lot more supported with social services, right? So moving back and being in a leadership position at a CAS. And that's how I started my private practice, because I was in a leadership position at a CAS in Ontario, Children's Aid Society.
Yes.
And I didn't want to lose sight of that connection with clients. That's a part I really enjoyed. So that's how I started my private practice. So I've always had a small private practice on the side while doing that. And then I left the CAS and went and worked in a children's mental health agency. I was there almost 10 years, still always doing my private practice. And it grew. And then there was a sort of standing point of where through COVID and maternity leaves, eventually shifting and deciding, I think I just want to do the full-time private practice. But I did always have the vision of growing into the group practice because of my leadership background and having both.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Would you say that your background of being in leadership and having experience with operations and systems was the main driver of building a group practice, or were there other things that informed that decision?
I think it was a little bit of everything. I think I really enjoy being a leader. A lot of what my leadership style is about is I'm in the trenches with you, and how can I help you to do your job better? And I really enjoy the leading and also the teaching and collaborating. So I've always had that as part of my personality. So I always wanted to go further into leadership. I originally thought maybe it would have been in the social service agency I was in, but then I pivoted direction and am now doing it in this space of my group clinic, right? So I've had a variety of staff. Right now I have 2 staff, and I have another, I have an intern starting in May, and I have some plans for growth in the future. Cool. So I really like having both sides of it. It helps me. And I'm a perpetual lifelong learner. I'm always doing it. I'm always doing 1 or 2 courses. I'm that nerd that reads textbooks.
I'm sure a lot of listeners can resonate. Like we get into the field because we're so, when I say the field, like a service-based business owner, because we're so passionate about the thing we do and we always want to learn, and then many of us who are creative and entrepreneurial, like we also want to have our own business. And sometimes what we don't realize is how much we're biting off. It's like actually two different jobs inside one.
Exactly. And there's a lot of different aspects of being a self-employed and entrepreneur. You have to wear so many different hats.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, so it sounds like the progression from doing agency work and being employed elsewhere into private practice was fairly seamless. And, the story I'm telling myself is that it probably wasn't all that difficult for you with your background and your experience to get one-on-one clients and build that up. But how did you know, you had a vision, from the get-go of building a group practice, but how did you know it was time to shift from the one-on-one into building a group? Like what were some of those things you were seeing or looking for in your business?
Well, wanting to step back, I wanted to take on a more of a clinical supervisor role and reduce my caseload.
Yeah.
It was a piece of it. Wanting to grow and help more people. One of the things that I want for my practice is sort of like an in-home, like in full service practice, right? So if I'm seeing a couple and my clients have children, then one of my staff can see their children. Or if I'm seeing a couple and say one of the partners needs more individualized therapy, I can refer within house, and it just makes for a more seamless and better treatment plan.
That's
in
nice.
that way. So I'm wanting to be able to have that. And another piece too was one thing that I have found that has been missing is that trauma-informed space. So there's a lot of there's a mixture of different types of therapists out there and backgrounds, but I want all my therapists to be trained in trauma because majority of challenges that we see, there is maybe a trauma piece there. And when we can recognize and work and acknowledge that, I find that also helps in someone's journey, in their healing journey, right? And having a better treatment plan for them and getting them to achieve their goals.
Yeah.
Right? So for example, with someone coming to me on a stress leave, they're like, oh, I'm stressful, I don't like my job. But when we sort of peel back the layers and look at the history, there might have been a lot of trauma, or they might have had a narcissistic boss. And having a therapist that has that trauma background really helps with them with their goals and returning them back to work.
Yeah. It makes so much sense hearing you explain your history and how your current business came to be. It sounds like your vision was just so clear from the get-go that there was just a lot of kind of natural evolution, first into private practice, then into the group practice. For folks listening who are maybe a little bit earlier on, whether they're just building their solo practice or whether they have a full private practice, whether it's in therapy or, consulting or coaching or whoever's listening, what advice would you give, in terms of just things to be aware of or to things to think about when you start making that shift from one-on-one to whether it's having a group practice, bringing on independent contractors, or expanding your services in different ways?
I definitely think that you need to have like all of your systems in place of what you're doing. So you do need to know the business side. So as a therapist, we're really great with the clinical side, but there's a whole business side to it that you need to learn, such as administrative policies, marketing, like making things automated, networking. So it's sort of, you're splitting your duties into two columns. There's the therapy side, but then the business. And if you want to scale and grow, you have to take the time on that side of it to learn all of those things. Because, there's lots of ways that therapy can be a competitive market, and you could start a private practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get clients for right away. You need really consistent referral sources and ways to get clients, right? Ways for them to find you. So I remember in grad school, the one professor had said, you don't put out your sign and they all come to the door. And I think that's still quite relevant today, that you need to know that whole business side.
Yes.
And figuring that out along the way, if that's your goal. And if that's your goal, that's great. It's figuring out the plan of what's going to work for you to encourage your growth in that way.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece. And you being a systems person, I want to dive a little further into that. Because for those of us that are either just wired naturally to think in systems, or whether it's a learning curve we've gone through, we can say that and we say, oh, we get it. We get, SOPs and policies and procedures manuals and all the things. But for those listening that hear you say something like, well, in order to grow or scale, or in order to move beyond one-on-one, systems are really important. Could you break down a little bit of exactly like how you did that? What was like the first step that you took, and how would you break that down for somebody who's new to learning about how to implement systems in their business?
I think like thinking about what are your daily duties and weekly duties and monthly duties, and what is the thing you're going to do. So for example, our client software is Jane. Yes. So great process. A lot of people practice on that. So that's an example of a system that you really need to know and figure out all of the processes, because all of your intake forms are in there. All of like the things you could potentially send to clients, the client reminders are very important. So learning the software that you're using to help you, right? For example, Jane, right? And then for systems and processes, if you Google is another part, like learning Google Workspace and how that works and how it can benefit you.
Yeah. I think that's a great description. One of the things I talk about with my clients, and that we've touched on this show before, is just really starting small and starting with, I love how you said like daily, weekly, monthly, and we haven't even met before. And that's the way I think about it too.
That's how I think of it, right? Like start off with what you can handle, get the basics going. You have to have that stuff in place. Otherwise you'll become very overwhelmed quite quickly.
Exactly.
And then slowly building from there. And I did learn from my business coach, automation is really important, especially as you're scaling and growing, because you do get overwhelmed with a lot of things, personal and business, right?
Yeah. I was leading a training last week, and actually one of the things we were talking about was the difference between documenting complexity versus documenting simplicity. And I don't know about you, but I have a tendency when I'm left to my own devices to overcomplicate things. So one of the things I've learned how to do before I document or before I ask someone to take over a task or something I'm doing is I think about, how can this be made easier? Like either through simplifying the process or automating parts of it. And, I started as an entrepreneur in 2011. I will certainly say the software and especially
the same time.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like the tools that are available to us now make automating and documenting things so much easier.
Yes.
So for those learning now, it is a lot easier than 15 years ago.
100%. Yeah. Like, for example, I know AI is a big thing and it's growing, and I haven't really used it as much, but I found in the last 6 months, I'm definitely using it more just strictly from like a performance and time standpoint of like, I can get more things done. Right.
And it's not about having it do it for you, but about
not at all.
The gap, right? We're in charge of the process, and it helps.
It's like a time management thing, actually.
Yeah.
Like I have a limited amount of time. I want to be really resourceful with the time. Right. And then my coordinator, we've been using it strategically of like, how can we help it with this task and things like that. But I being a bit old school, it's like we still want our flavor on it. I only want it to supplement. I don't want it to be the only thing. I don't think that would work for my vision for the future anyway.
At least not at this stage and depending on the role. But I like to think of it as like a really well-trained assistant.
That's what I've sort of thought of it as. And we've sort of started dabbling in that a little bit. It just strictly, like I said, for time and efficiency. And it really has helped in that way.
Yeah, fantastic. So I know you held leadership positions, before you had your own private practice. But I'm curious if you noticed any differences that you encountered in running a group practice. So as you've shifted from one-on-one in your own business to having a group practice, having associates, what are some of the, leadership challenges or mindset shifts that you've had to make as a business owner as you've started to manage a team and expand?
Well, I'm used to having to do absolutely everything. Right. So being able to shift to really fine tune again, the delegation, and as you grow. So now there's certain tasks I've passed off to my coordinator. So that's more administrative. And then certain tasks I've passed off for marketing. So like knowing what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, and how for those weaknesses can I delegate them or like buy back my time so that I'm giving that to somebody who's really great in doing those things.
Yes. Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I think it's such an important lesson. And for those that are earlier on in the startup or still working to build their one-on-one,
you have to do everything, but eventually sort of like step by step of like, what are those things, because that's just a reality of building.
Yeah. And I see some business owners get into trouble because they think that that's optional if they're going to grow. If we want to maintain the practice, 101, and we want to maintain a smaller business, it's certainly possible to do everything ourselves. And as you said,
and
we
you have to
at the beginning, but we reach a point where we can't do it all ourselves anymore.
No.
Yeah. Awesome. Quick resource for you. If you've hit consistent revenue, but working harder isn't creating more growth, I put together a free guide called From 10K to 40K Months. It breaks down what actually has to change when you move from solopreneur energy into real scaling. Structure, profit, team, capacity, not just marketing tactics. If you're ready for growth that feels sustainable instead of chaotic, go download it. It's free. The link's in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. So you've built a business that you dreamed about for a really long time. Mm-hmm. What would be some either just like some personal turning points or challenges that you've experienced, or lessons learned that you'd love to pass along to some of the listeners here?
The first thing that comes to mind is personal life. So it's really challenging to build a business and grow if you have your own personal trauma and crises. And you had mentioned like one of my specialties is narcissistic abuse. And the reason why it is because I'm in the process of divorcing, right? And having experience and sort of realizing in my own personal life that there was a couple people in my family. My stepmother who's passed away was a narcissist, and realizing that my ex-husband was a narcissist.
Wow.
So going through life and wanting to do great in business, but then you have these unavoidable traumatic things that happen to you in personal life, and how do you continue to persevere?
So challenging.
And I think like the evolution of me really going into trauma and narcissistic abuse is because of my own personal experiences. So I'm really able to bring like my personal experience and emotional understanding. And it sort of evolutionarily happened because a lot of my clients were coming to me with similar problems, and I'm like,
wait a minute,
God keep sending me all of these clients, what's going on here? And that like informed my own personal journey, and then it sort of led to a whole new niche.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And having to navigate a personal life that there was a lot of stuff going on there, resulting in my own PTSD. And so combining that with then still running and growing a business, I have had people say to me, wait, you've been growing your business while you've been going through all these personal crises? I'm like, yes, I'm still going. I'm still trying. I'm still learning.
Still pushing forward.
I'm literally walking the talk. So I think that for me in my growth of business has been the biggest thing, is like navigating my personal life along with growing my business at the same time.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that you're saying that I want to highlight. And one is just firstly, the importance and just for me, it's important to normalize how we're all going through stuff, whether it's narcissistic abuse, whether it's trauma, whether it's, like
we're all therapists.
Whatever. Yes. That I don't think I've ever met a female business owner who wasn't going through something in their personal life. And one, I just want to normalize and acknowledge, that we're all going through that at varying degrees.
We are. And I think there needs to be a safe space to say that. And then especially if you're a therapist, it's very important if you're a therapist to have your own personal awareness, to know what are your challenges and your weaknesses? What are the things that you're going through? Because then that allows you to show up and be a better therapist for your clients. So that like self-care, sense of self is really important.
Yeah, you're touching on both of the points that came up for me. Line we are here is, like normalizing, knowing that we're all going through this at different times to different degrees. Also, how important it is to be proactive and take care of ourselves, because how on earth can we show up for the demands of our business when we're not able to show up for ourselves, and just getting that support and not hesitating to reach out and get support for ourselves. And then I'm also often struck by how many women I speak with whose services in their business align so closely with the gifts and experiences and lessons, they've learned along the way. Can you say a little bit more about how, whether for you personally or what you see in your associates or in general, how our own personal experiences can really be a gift and inform what we bring to our professional lives?
Yeah, it's like it was a natural sort of evolution for me. And after experiencing everything that I've experienced, and also a lot of my clients, because it was a lot of my clients that actually led me to more self-awareness in my personal life.
Yeah.
I feel a collective responsibility of like, okay, how can I help people with similar challenges and issues and traumas, frankly, with that, and being able to bring my personal experience in a limited way, but like even just that what I mean by that is that emotional understanding. So if I have similar clients of similar backgrounds, and like I can say to them like, I can understand how you feel. And they truly know that. They truly know that because sharing limitedly, obviously, they will know that like I have both of those to go with it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. It's so powerful. And that shared understanding and that, trust really is meaningful in a therapeutic experience.
And my love for learning like shows, actually, it really shows here because as I'm trying to figure out, it started out with me trying to help my clients and figure out what was going on with my clients, and then having some self-awareness, and then continuing that learning and continuing that research and doing more training and certification on things.
Yeah. Awesome. So fast forwarding, not only to present day, but even ahead, as you look into the future, 12 months, 2 to 3 years from now, what do you imagine? Like, what's your vision for what you want to continue to build here?
Well, 1, 3, 5-year goals, we think about those all the time. I want to continue to grow my group practice. So I'm looking at adding on 2 or 3 more staff this year, which would be amazing. Looking at getting out the message more about trauma and narcissistic abuse and being a survivor and what that looks like. So I was actually meeting with my coordinator this week and going over what is our sort of like marketing and networking plan to grow the business, to grow the clinic with more staff and getting the message out. Yeah. And I have a book idea too. So I'm thinking as the evolutionary growing on social media and getting that message out, I also have an idea for a book too that I would like to see.
That's so exciting. Yeah. What would you say? Because I know there's a lot of folks out there who either have group practices or have shifted away from one-on-one into other types of offerings. What would you say has worked well for you in marketing? Like, what are some of the strategies that have worked, are working, and what are the inherent challenges you found in shifting gears and how you market a group practice versus one-on-one?
So, like the therapy listing services such as Psychology Today is definitely so. Making sure you're on therapy listing services, having Google Ads, also optimizing your Google business profile. Those are the 3 things that I have done mainly. And like outsource, and then inside I do making sure I'm following up with existing clients, doing email marketing. So there's a mixture of outhouse, sort of in-house, different things that way. And networking. I've been going to family doctors a little bit more the past few months. So a mixture of different things. You have to make sure you have different referral sources coming in. Yeah.
I love your focus on, I call them warm referral sources, right? Instead of just hiding behind the screen all the time. I mean, Google Ads is one thing and can absolutely be very effective, but I love your focus on networking and warm referral sources, because regardless of your business, that is often the first and still even the strongest for many service-based businesses, even once they have multiple offerings.
Yeah. And if I'm looking at like tracking my consult calls for the clinic, there's also a small portion has been word of mouth too, right? So just trying to acknowledge all the different sources in the way to grow, because you can't overly rely on one thing.
Yes, I love that. It's so important. I'm curious what your take is. I speak with a lot of private practice owners who struggle with shifting from advertising or marketing themselves as one-on-one therapists to a group practice. And I see folks do one of 2 things. I see folks stick with the same strategy where when you have a one-on-one practice, you're advertising yourself. It's your face, right? It's here's who I am. Here's what I do. And sometimes what I see as folks start to grow group practice is they try to do the same thing with their associates. They promote the individual associate. And what I see over time is that it can certainly work. But as the practice grows, and especially if they have turnover, it can create problems because it's kind of like you're advertising multiple businesses because you're trying to promote individuals. Whereas the other option is to figure out what is the message of the clinic as a whole, right? Who do we as a collective serve, and marketing the clinic as opposed to the individual. What have you found works, doesn't work? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, I think for individual, like the Psychology Today listing is a piece of like the individual. And then if you go to the website, obviously the profiles are there. If you go to book online, because we are available to book online, you'll see the individual. But a lot of like, a lot of my networking and marketing is the clinic and what the clinic has to offer.
Yeah.
So I think there's a time and a place for individualized. And then I've done individual of like social media posts of different therapists along the way that I've had. So now that you're saying that, I am doing a mixture of both, but like I have rack cards and flyers, and it just talks about the whole service, all of the services.
Nice. Yeah. And the way I'll just put a frame around that to help for the listeners who are trying to conceptualize or figure that out for themselves. If you think about the marketing funnel, you might have, I'm sure you've heard the top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Yeah. Top of funnel is where we build awareness. Middle of funnel is where we nurture. Bottom of funnel is where someone becomes a client. Yeah. And a lot of the pieces of what you just shared, is often how I'll teach as well, is the top of funnel should be focused on the clinic as a whole, who we are as a clinic, what we do. And then as someone becomes aware and starts to engage with your materials and gets to the decision point of wanting to work with an individual therapist, that's where, for you, your individual profiles on your website come in, or, they get connected with an individual.
Yeah, and having like the consultation calls, I would say probably 90 to 95% of people start with a consultation call, unless it's sort of we'll say about 90%, because then there's word of mouth. They'll just book. They don't need the consultation call. So then that's about fitting it with like which therapist will work best with you. And then they're trusting that works. And then if it isn't a good fit, well, maybe we might switch you, but that really happens right now. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. What would you say is the one thing you're most excited about in the coming months and years ahead?
I would say like just the overall growth, and also spreading the message of how we can work through trauma and how we can work through like our daily life experiences.
Yeah, fantastic. And just final question for you, Melissa, like for our listeners who are, tuning in and kind of looking up the ladder, so to speak, seeing what you've built. Is there anything else, any message you want to pass along, any last little like tidbits of advice?
I would definitely say it starts with your own personal belief about yourself.
So profound.
Yeah. I think because if you don't have a good sense of self and you don't have strong beliefs about yourself and your capacity, along with some self-compassion, of course, along the way, I think like that's sort of like the foundation, right? Of who you see yourself as, and what is your vision and goal, and what are your values. That's your foundation for whatever it is that you have to build. And then also being able to put in the work, right? There's a lot of grind and work and effort there, which I find entrepreneurs know. They know they've got to do all of those pieces.
Yes, or if they don't know out of the gate, they learn very quickly.
and working and not being afraid to pivot and take on new things too, right? I think that we have to grow with the times. So for example, like AI has been a big thing lately. If you have someone saying, absolutely not, I'm not going to do that, well, that's going to hinder your growth. So there's a time and a place to take on new things and adopt new things in your journey, which is important. So I would say those three things.
Growth edge. Love that. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about your work and what you do, where's the best place to find you?
The best place would be the website directly. So www.mcounseling.ca, and it's with 2 L's. So, because I know in the States,
because you're in Canada.
And in Canada, there's 2 L's. Or through my LinkedIn profile. Also, if you go to the website, we have a messaging feature, so you can speak directly. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing about your journey and the tidbits of advice that I'm sure are very helpful for those who are listening. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more at hucklehorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.